기름새를 조금만 줄여주십시오.
네. 그 준비하셨어요?
5분짜리만.
처음에 10분 준비했다가 또 줄여야
그래서 영어로 준비하셨죠?
네. 와. 일단 한국어로 쓰고 요새는 워낙 잘해주니까. 조금 더 쓰고
이쪽을. 예.
우리말에는 끝에 한 점은 떨어진다고.
떨어진 위험이 있었나 봐요.
식임을 굉장히 많이 써요. 반갑습니다. 늘 좋은 메시지 계속
I don't know if it's great, but I'm trying my best. Thank
이
you.
메모한 게 보면
It's easy for me because
혹시 메모한 거 제가 촬영 하나 드릴게요.
if there's no possible way you can read it.
비밀은
It's written in code. I can't even read it.
비밀은 지키고.
You'll have to take it to the code.
I think the Grand Commission is higher than strong for someone.
Koreans like that.
우리도 이제 메모를 이렇게 메모해가지고 쓰는데 그런 건 옛날에 쓰는 거 우리가 이제 과거에 좀 기억이 나서 내가 요새는 그냥 여기다가 다시 해가지고 오늘 얘기할 것도 메모를 여기다 이렇게 해가지고
정확하게 5분 후에 시작하겠습니다. 5분 후에.
5분 후에
I'm sorry, saying.
잠깐 나가서 올라오는데 갇혔어. 갇혔어. thank you. Thank you.
정확하게
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our congressional briefing hosted by KCPAC, Crisis in South Korea. Welcome everyone. Again, if you haven't grabbed your box lunch yet, please do so there in the back, along with refreshments and other snacks. It is my distinct pleasure and great honor to call to the podium Ambassador Morse Camp to introduce the special speakers and guests today. So let's welcome Ambassador Camp.
It's a real privilege and pleasure to be here together in Congress, and this is being broadcast through various channels, and I think there are many people in Korea especially who are keenly watching what we are doing here. I believe that in the crisis going on in the Korean Peninsula, that we are reaching a key turning point with respect to what is going on. You may have noticed just hours before meeting with Lee Jae-myung, President Trump had called out in Truth Social, "What is going on in South Korea?" All capital letters, as President Trump is wont to do. It looks like there is a purge or revolution. We cannot do business with that. This was a clarion call that indicates that President Trump, the most powerful man in the world, with the most difficult job in the world as President of the United States, is recognizing that there has been a revolution and purge in South Korea. What does this look like? The revolution is because there has been the death of democracy. What has happened is that due to election fraud, and this is part of a larger phenomenon of election fraud going on around the world, due to election fraud, democracy has died in South Korea. When President Yoon took the risk of declaring martial law in order to investigate this election fraud, he was unfairly and illegally impeached, even though he has the authority to declare martial law under Article 77 of the South Korean Constitution, and then was illegally removed from office by the Constitutional Court, illegally thrown in jail, and he's again been thrown in jail again. Double jeopardy, that's a violation of double jeopardy, to put him in jail and then put him in jail again. And then there was an emergency snap election in which there was an unprecedented amount of election cheating that took place to put Lee Jae-myung into the president's seat. This is a revolution. This is a coup d'etat. This is something that the U.S., according to U.S. law, merits economic sanctions. And President Trump saw this revolution, and what is the purge part? The Lee Jae-myung administration is going after the best leaders, the most heroic leaders, those who are standing up for their country, those who are fighting for democracy, truth, and justice. The Lee Jae-myung administration is seeking to purge. He says he wants to end the insurrectionists. Even though he is the insurrectionist, he's saying, I want to end 1,200 insurrectionists. If you look at a website, colonelyoon.com, You have about 800 people who are featured on there, and those are some of the most heroic, noble, wonderful leaders, especially in South Korea, who are fighting this fight as we speak. And he's trying to purge them. Churches are being raided, as President Trump has called out. The Osan Joint Air Base has been raided. Even the Command and Control Center, where there is radar data about everything that is flying around the Korean Peninsula, that was invaded in violation of the Status of Forces Agreement, where there must be notice and permission given by the US government. There was no notice and there was no permission, and it was illegally raided by the special prosecutor, who I think President Trump was alluding to when he said deranged Jack Smith, the prosecutor who had prosecuted President Trump. The parallels actually between what the US has experienced in the fraudulent 2020 election and what South Korea has been experiencing has been remarkable. There have been all sorts of parallels that have been going on here. And so there has been a revolution, there has been a purge, and it is high time for more and more people, especially in America, to wake up and to realize that it's happening. The good news is there are many more voices that are springing up among American leadership that are recognizing and realizing that we are in danger of potentially losing our best ally in the world, South Korea, to a communist revolution and purge leading to a communist dictatorship. That is the time in which we live. Communist doctrine says that you have a long march through the institutions. And that has been happening in South Korea, whether in the educational system, whether in the media, whether in the trade unions, whether in every branch of the South Korean government, in all the different areas and institutions that are the main levers of power and influence in South Korea. There has been a long march through the institutions, and now we are in the final stage. Is South Korea going to become a communist dictatorship, or will it be able to remain the best ally that the United States has in the world? Not to mention that most critical of regions, Northeast Asia. That is the time that we have reached. That is the level of the crisis where we have the culmination of the long march through the institutions, and is South Korea going to fall to communism or not? I am thankful for many other voices that are starting to rise up here from American leadership. Former Speaker of the House Newt Gingrich has, right after the meeting with President Trump and Lee Jae-myung, was calling out this crisis in South Korea. We are very thankful for his voice that is calling this out. Or whether you talk about Ambassador Carlos Sands, who was Trump's ambassador to Denmark during the first administration, whether you're talking about Gordon Chang, whether you're talking about Trump's first national security advisor, Michael Flynn, whether you're talking about Steve Bannon, whether you're talking about Laura Loomer, whether you're talking about Bart Marquardt, who will also be speaking on a panel with us on Thursday. There are more and more American voices and leaders and influencers here in the United States who are realizing what is going on, who are calling it out, and waking up a previously sleeping giant known as the United States of America. There would be no South Korea other than the United States. If the US-led UN coalition did not intervene in the Korean War, you would have one full peninsula of darkness, where it would be North Korea all the way down. And yet, who would have imagined that we would be in this crisis where you have the communization of South Korea going on and a potential attempt to have a unified communist peninsula from South Korea. Who could have imagined this? And the reason why a lot of people have trouble imagining this is because the vast majority of Koreans people don't want that. Like 90% of Koreans consider the US to be the best ally. Around 80% of Koreans are against the Chinese Communist Party. And yet with the infiltration from North Korea, the infiltration from the Chinese Communist Party, where they're trying to overwhelm South Korea, and with the administration right now in South Korea that's opening all the windows and doors to the CCP and to North Korea, we have a crisis of historic proportions right now in South Korea. And we're privileged to have a wonderful panel of people to address this. People who I honor and respect because the ones in South Korea, they're risking a lot to do the work that they've been doing because there is a purge going on. And the first person that I will introduce to you that we are honored and privileged to have is Prime Minister and former acting President Hwang, who has also been one of the key leaders in fighting against election fraud that is being performed by the National Election Commission, internationally through AWEB, which has 109 member states. He has led this election justice army that has been monitoring elections. He is such an important influence and voice. We wonder whether he will become the president of a unified Korea someday in the future. It is our great privilege and honor to welcome Prime Minister Hwang, our keynote speaker for this panel.
Thank you very much. 한국식으로 인사하겠습니다. 반갑습니다.
안녕하세요.
정말 귀한 시간을 내주셔서 함께해 주신 모든 분들에게 감사의 말씀을 드립니다.
Thank you for spending your precious time for us. I'd like to thank you once again.
저는 오늘 여러 가지 얘기를 하려고 하는데 시간이 넉넉지 않기 때문에 짧게 말씀을 드릴 거고요. 혹시라도 이해가 덜 되시는 분들이 있다면 나중에 또 말씀드릴 기회를 갖도록 이렇게 하겠습니다.
There are many things that I want to tell you, but because of the time constraint, I'm going to keep it short. If there are further things that you want to know, we would set aside another time, another opportunity to discuss it more fully.
얼마 전에 대선이 있었습니다. 대한민국에 대선이 있었는데 그 대선 직전 5월 1일 이재명에 대한 재판이 있었습니다. 대법원의 재판이 됐습니다. 이것은 고등법원에서 무죄 판결한 것을 유죄라고 바꾼 그런 대법원의 판결이 있었습니다.
On May 1st, just before the presidential election, which was held on June 3rd, the Supreme Court issued a ruling overturning the appellate court's acquittal and remanded the case to Seoul High Court. So, with a guilty verdict intent.
대법원 판결은 파기환송이어서 이 사건이 대법원에서 끝나지 않고 고등법원으로 다시 내려갔습니다.
The appellate court's acquittal was remanded and sent back to the Seoul High Court with a guilty verdict.
그러나 그 취지는 유죄인데 고등법원에서 정리를 해라 하는 취지의 결론은 확정된 이런 파기환송이었습니다.
Although it was remanded to the Seoul High Court, the intent was that the verdict is guilty. So, although it was sent back to the Seoul High Court, it was a guilty verdict in a sense.
그런데 판송받은 고법에서 처리를 지연했습니다. 그 바람에 이재명이 대통령이 될 수 있는 시간을 벌었습니다.
But the appellate court purposely delayed the process and allowed Lee Jae-myung to run as president.
그 판결이 정상적으로 법대로 진행됐으면 이재명은 대통령직에 나올 자격이 없어지는 것이었습니다.
If the proceeding went place properly and legally, then Lee Jae-myung would have been unqualified to be a candidate for presidency.
실질적으로는 유죄 판결을 받아서 선거에 나올 수 없는 사람이 대통령이 되는 이런 불법이 지금 대한민국에서 벌어진 것입니다.
So, a person who had the verdict of being guilty because of legal procedures was able to run in the presidential election and was able to become the president. This kind of illegal actions took place in South Korea.
그런데 이런 일, 부정선거가 2020년 총선에서부터 선거 때까지, 또 직전까지의 선거 때까지 계속 부정선거가 저질러졌습니다.
However, election fraud took place ever since 2020 for each and every election after that.
엄청나게 많은 증거, 부정선거의 증거들이 나왔습니다. 그래서 우리가 고소하고 여러 가지 문제, 선거 무효성도 내고 여러 가지 대응을 했지만 말도 안 되는 파기, 말도 안 되는 무죄가 나고 말았습니다.
So there were numerous and countless evidences pointing to election fraud. We tried every means. We tried to go for nullifying the results of the elections. However, there were many things that the Supreme Court ruled that was out of nonsense.
지난번 대선에서도 많은 부정선거들이 저질러져서 제가 그 자료를 간략하게 요약을 해서 여러분들에게 이메일이나 이렇게 드렸던 걸로 기억이 됩니다. 뭐 이런 부정선거의 증거들이 요 바로 직전 대선에서 이재명이 대통령이 된 그 선거에서 엄청난 부정선거들이 저질러졌다는 겁니다.
Even for the very recent presidential election where Lee Jae-myung became the president, there were countless evidences of election fraud, and I believe that you have been given the evidences. Some of you have the email document form, some of you have the copies. As you could see, there were numerous frauds that could be found in that election.
이재명에 대해서는 이외에도 많은 불법들이 있어가지고 수사를 거쳐서 재판 과정에 진행되고 있는 것들이 많이 있었는데 이 선거, 이 무효 판결 하나로 대통령의 길이 확 뚫렸던 것입니다.
Actually, Lee Jae-myung was facing many guilty verdicts and he was to be tried in the trials. However, because of the court's ruling, he was able to have his candidacy.
전임 대통령 문재인에 이어서 이번 이재명 대통령에게 이제 정권이 넘어가면서 대한민국은 무너지고 있습니다.
After the Moon Jae-in administration, now that Lee Jae-myung has taken office, South Korea is crumbling down.
자유민주주의가 무너지고 있는 것입니다. 입법사법 행정이 다 이재명에게 강점됐습니다.
The liberal democracy is crumbling down in Korea as Lee Jae-myung has taken hold of the executive, judiciary, and the administrative branches of South Korea.
이런 것을 우리 모두는 독재라고 하고 있습니다. 이재명 정권은 독재 정권입니다.
This is what we call dictatorship. Lee Jae-myung is a dictator. His regime is a dictatorship regime.
지금 이런 입법을 잘못된 악한 입법을 통해서 대한민국이 무너지고 있습니다.
And the Republic of Korea is falling apart because of these legislations that are being carried out by Lee Jae-myung.
법이 무너지고 있어요. 노란 봉투법 이걸 통해 가지고 아무리 파업을 해도 처벌도 안 돼요.
So there are many legislations that is actually detrimental to South Korea, such as the Yellow Envelope Act.
사고만 나면 그 회사의 최고 책임자가 처벌되는 이런 법도 만들어졌습니다.
Labor unions could carry out strikes without being punished, and the CEO could be punished severely for any industrial accidents.
여러분 이런 법 보셨습니까? 중대재해처벌법. 기업인들은 마음대로 기업을 경영하기 어렵게 되어버렸습니다.
And because of the Severe Disaster Punishment Act, corporate leaders are unable to run their companies freely.
이제는 대법원까지 불법적으로 압박하고 있습니다.
And now he is illegally putting pressure on the Supreme Court.
현직 대법원장을 억지로 강제로 무리하게 쫓아내려고 하고 있습니다.
He's trying to oust the current legitimate Supreme Justice by all means.
대법원 숫자를 확 늘려서 그래서 자기 마음에 드는 대법관들을 세워놔가지고 법원을 내 마음대로 주무르려고 하고 있습니다.
And he is going to drastically increase the numbers of justices in the Supreme Court so that he could cherry pick the Supreme Justices that he favors him, so that he could control the judiciary system.
검찰을 해체하고 있습니다.
And he is dismantling the prosecution office.
필요하면 자기들이 여러 번 특검들을 만들어서 대한민국 법치를 왜곡하고 있습니다.
And he's taking opportunities to set up special prosecutions so that they will do what Lee Jae-myung wants them to do at his will.
내란 특별재판부 이런 게 바로 그 얘기인 것입니다.
One such example is the Insurrection Special Tribunal.
예산도 마음대로 하고 대통령이 직접 다룰 수 있도록 예산권을 가져왔습니다.
And he also had taken over the budget. The president is able to make changes to the budget at his own will.
이런 것들을 가능하게 할 수 있도록 윤석열 대통령을 불법적으로 강제적으로 쫓아냈습니다.
In order to carry out these actions, he had legally ousted President Yoon and jailed him.
뭐 할 얘기 많지만 시간이 적으니까 축소하겠습니다만 줄이겠습니다만은 그러나 대한민국의 수사권도 다 무너져서 검찰이 횡령되고 다 대통령만 문재인 마음대로 할 수 있도록 이렇게 바뀌어져 버렸습니다.
There are many things that I have to say, but in short, Korea is coming down. Lee Jae-myung has also taken the investigative power and taken all the investigation power from the prosecutor. So he's able to investigate people that he wants to.
공산주의라고 하는 대한민국 탄핵이 당해서 끌려가는 대통령을 보고서 대한민국의 청년들이 붕괴해서 일어났습니다.
However, as Korea is becoming communized because of this threat and because President Yoon was impeached in this way, the young people of Korea has risen up.
지금 대한민국에서는 깨어있는 많은 민주 시민들이 들고 일어나고 있습니다.
The patriots of Korea has woken up to defend democracy in Korea.
집회 시위 때마다 엄청난 사람들이 모이고 있습니다.
Whenever there's a rally or demonstration, there's numerous people who flock to us.
그 중에 절대 다수가 청년들입니다. 20대, 30대 이런 사람들이 주류를 이루고 있습니다.
And those in their 20s and 30s are actually leading the demonstrations and rallies.
정말 전례가 없는 일인데 이런 일이 벌어지니까 이제는 사법적 통제를 가하고 있습니다.
It's an unprecedented event. So in order to control the demonstrations and the patriots, now Lee Jae-myung is trying to control the judiciary system.
집회를 하겠다고 해도 신고를 받지 않는 또는 신고를 왜곡하는 이런 만행을 저지르고 있습니다.
Even if people want to demonstrate, the police is refusing to accept the registration of demonstration, thereby undermining the right to demonstrate.
우파 정치인들에게는 말도 안 되는 그런 억압이 벌어지고 있습니다.
These severe persecution and oppression is taking place against conservative politicians.
저는 오랫동안 자유민주주의를 지키기 위해서 검찰에 근무하면서 공화국으로서 간첩자 같은 사람이고 부정선거를 막아냈던 사람입니다.
For most of my life, I have served as a public security prosecutor to defend a free democracy. In order to do that, I investigated spies and nabbed them.
민주당이 나라를 무너뜨리고 있고 그리고 국민의힘 당이 막아내지 못하고 무력하게 무너지고 있기 때문에 저는 신당을 창당했습니다.
Because the Democratic Party of Korea is ruining democracy in Korea, and the People Power Party was powerless and did not take any action, I had to step up and set up my new party.
창당한 지 이틀 만에 제 당사에 압수수색이 들어왔습니다.
However, just 2 days after I founded my new party, the police raided my office.
저를 조사하겠다고 압수수색하고 출두 요구를 하고 있습니다.
They want to investigate me, so they have seized and raided my office and also sent summons to me.
저에 대한 탄압은 자유민주 시민들에 대한 탄압을 상징하는 것입니다.
Oppression on me symbolizes the oppression on patriots who are trying to defend free democracy in Korea.
지금 그래서 국제적 연대가 필요한 상황이 되어버렸습니다.
That is why we need to gain solidarity internationally.
한미는 동맹 아닙니까? 그것도 혈맹입니다.
United States and Korea has a blood-forged alliance.
우리가 무너지면 동맹이 무너지게 되는 거고 미국도 많은 어려움을 당하게 될 수밖에 없습니다.
If we fall down in Korea, then that means there will be a break in this alliance. And then that will also be detrimental to the United States.
그래서 제가 여기 와서 미국 국민들에게 호소하고 미국 정부에 호소하고 있는 것입니다.
That is why I have traveled all the way here to urge Americans, to urge the US government.
현재의 민주주의의 위기는 우리나라만의 것이 아니라 글로벌 위기입니다.
The current crisis in terms of democracy that Korea faces is not limited to the Korean Peninsula, but it's a global one.
민주주의의 후퇴는 곧 중국과 북한의 영향력 확대와 직결됩니다.
If democracy is retreated in the Korean Peninsula in South Korea, that means North Korea and China will be even more powerful.
그래서 지금 대한민국에서는 반중 그리고 반북한 운동들이 일어나고 있습니다.
That is why the young people and patriots of Korea is crying against North Korea and crying against China.
비로소 일어난 이런 대한민국의 민주화 운동, 자유민주주의 지키기 위한 운동, 반국가 세력들과의 싸움, 저는 이런 체제 전쟁에 우리 미국 시민들과 국제사회의 연대가 꼭 필요하다고 생각을 합니다.
At the moment, Korea is rising up to fight against anti-state forces, against China, against communist forces. It is at a war, which is a war of system. So I want to urge all Americans, all the people around the world to solidify with us, to stand with us together in this fight.
여기 오신 모든 분들 그리고 미국이 또 국제사회가 이 사태의 위험성을 엄중성을 이해하고 함께 힘을 모아주시면 좋겠습니다. 저희 대한민국은 자유민주주의를 반드시 지켜내겠습니다. 감사합니다.
I'd like to ask all of you here, the patriots of the United States, everyone from all corners of the world to stand together with us to fight this war against the system. I'd like to let us fight together in this fight. So thank you for listening.
Thank you, Prime Minister Bond, for pointing out the lawfare where law is being weaponized and how democracy has died in South Korea, where the constitutional republic freedoms and rights are being attacked. Our next speaker will be Colonel Grant Newsham, who's also an attorney and author. Grant Newsham wrote the very important book, When China Attacks, where he diagnoses how the Chinese Communist Party is seeking worldwide domination, attacking the United States, attacking South Korea, and all over the world. Colonel Newsham is not a Johnny-come-lately to the election fraud issue. He's been on it since 2020. He has edited volumes, large volumes on this subject. He has continued to be a voice through his writing and through various ways. He and I were part of the international election monitoring team that went to South Korea. And it is our great privilege and honor to have Colonel Grant Newsham share with us right now.
Thanks very much, Morrison. Thanks everyone for coming. The U.S.-South Korea alliance is rock solid. It was forged in the blood of the Korean War. And there's a few things that are problematic, but it's a solid relationship and we'll weather it, we'll get over it. That's what you hear all the time, but it's also wrong. What you're seeing in South Korea is an effort by hardcore radicals, a relatively small group of them, ruthless and violent. And what they want to do is to establish a one-party state in South Korea that is aligned with the People's Republic of China and North Korea, and that is anti-American. And it no longer has a military alliance with the United States. That's what we're seeing happen. And that may be just impossible to believe, I think, for most people. But that's the reality. And what you're seeing resembles what happened in Venezuela. If not, nobody in the front rows is old enough to remember the beginning of it. They've seen the ending of it. And this is what happened when Hugo Chavez took over, gradually took over every lever of power in the country and used it to persecute the opposition and establish a one-party state. And now Venezuela is an enemy, it's a communist nation basically, and it used to be just like South Korea, a very strong ally, the strongest ally in Latin America. And we thought we had a rock-solid relationship with them. Well, we didn't. We don't anymore. And that's what we're seeing happen. And if you just do the homework, what you will see is this systematic effort by South Korean leftists to take every lever of power in the country. Go down the list: the National Assembly, the presidency, the media, the judiciary, the police, the election commission, academia, not that that's ever very hard, the labor unions, big business, and the military. They're trying to get all of these, and when you have it, you have the country. And this is a playbook that we have seen a lot. And used to, actually, after World War II, it's how the communists went about taking over the nations in Eastern Europe. And the evidence is there, and it can be not hard to spot, you just have to make the effort to understand it. But too many people have fallen back on this notion that it's a rock-solid relationship because of the Korean War. And if that's all you see, you're missing the problem. Now, election fraud certainly happened in South Korea since 2020, as I've been looking at it. And election fraud is a tool towards an end. And that's how it's always used. And this was to establish overwhelming control of the National Assembly and to get the presidency. Now, but if this is baseless, it's debunked, there's no evidence. Well, there's a ton of evidence, and we put it together, and people sitting at this table that put it together, it's there to be examined. And has anyone ever examined evidence of electoral fraud in South Korea? Certainly the South Korean regime has not done it. Foreign press has been unwilling to look at it. And as far as I know, the United States government has refused to examine the evidence, or just been too lazy to do it, but it is there. And it is there to be challenged and debunked. And I will wait here for the next 6 months for somebody to show me a report of somebody who has looked into these charges. And yet the leftists have used this very effectively to get the National Assembly and the presidency. One thing you hear a lot is that, well, the new president of South Korea, Lee Jae-myung, is a pragmatist. Because after he took office, he said, well, the U.S.-Korea relationship is really important. And he said, well, we get along with the Japanese. Therefore, he has suddenly become a pragmatist, moderate, despite a lifetime that's completely the opposite. He met, as you know, with President Trump recently. And it seemed like President Trump was going to challenge him on this leftist takeover, but something happened and Mr. Trump did not. And Lee Jae-myung went back to South Korea. He was breathing a sigh of relief. And what did he do after he got back? He stepped on the gas. He doubled down. He went even harder after the religious organizations, arresting pastors. He has gone after the opposition parties and members of the opposition parties to persecute them. He just recently also said, well, he was criticizing the submissive mindset that comes of relying on foreign troops. And if you read that, you know what it means. What he's saying is, we don't want U.S. troops on the Korean Peninsula. He's very clear about it. He has also said, well, about that $350 billion in investment that I promised Mr. Trump, I don't think we're going to do it. So after meeting Mr. Trump, he's basically gone back to Korea and said, well, I pulled a fast one on the President of the United States. And I am going to do everything I can to get this total control. Previously, Lee Jae-myung said, look into his background, and it doesn't give you any confidence. He has said that U.S. troops in Korea are an occupying force. He recently told the Vietnamese he congratulated them for having defeated foreign troops and reunified their nation. Well, that's a nice insult to the Americans and to Koreans who served in South Vietnam. He sent the head of the National Assembly to attend the Chinese Communist Party's World War II victory parade the other day. And that was the only civilized country that actually sent somebody to that event. He has also made it so in South Korea, if protesters go out, they're not allowed to actually go out and criticize the Chinese Communist Party, the PRC, but they can go in front of the United States Embassy and they can take pictures of President Trump and tear them apart. And the police have been told to go after the people who are criticizing China, but criticizing the United States, no problem at all. So it's not hard to figure out where he's coming from or what he thinks. So when it comes to South Korea, too often, the U.S. side policymakers, the U.S. military is particularly guilty. Think tanks, very often they have their reasons, often financial, for looking at things a certain way. But we tend to look at this military-to-military relationship, which is actually pretty good, and our economic relationship with South Korea, which is strong. But if you look at that, what you miss is this effort to erode the basis, the foundation of the U.S.-South Korea alliance by this group of hardcore radicals that is trying to take a country where most people don't want to go. And we've seen that happen, just like in Venezuela. So it's easy and it's important to understand the nature of South Korean leftists, what their objectives are, what their intentions. And really, sometimes all you have to do is just listen to what they say and also listen to what they do. So I really want to stress just the danger to South Korea as a consensual democracy aligned with the United States. And at some point, we're going to wake up and decide they're going to be before disaster strikes, or it's going to be after disaster strikes, and we end up with another Venezuela wondering, well, how did that happen? Well, we're watching it happen in real time. There's still some time, but not much. And the Koreans here on this panel, these are the people who are fighting against a very ruthless enemy, and it is a lonely, difficult struggle. As you know what a regime can do to people who challenge it. So I really admire my colleagues up here, but I do encourage the staffers, Capitol Hill, people in Congress to just do some homework and be aware of the challenges that we're facing. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Colonel Nugent, for that wake-up call. We have next Attorney Park Ju-yeon. And when I say to you that he is the attorney challenging election fraud and fighting these fights in South Korea, I'm not exaggerating one bit. He is the attorney who is fighting these fights. And so with that, let me welcome Attorney Park Ju-yeon.
Nice to meet you. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm attorney of Korea. The very foundation of free democracy is shaking. This is not simply a political conflict, it is structural problem. It threatens the existence of the nation itself. 75 years ago, many young Americans gave their lives to protect Korea's freedom in the Korean War. They were war martyrs of freedom, heroes like Charlie Kirk. Today, their sacrifice is at risk of being erased. South Korea has been gravely undermined by election fraud, orchestrated by the CSP and pro-China forces. Without bloodshed, without guns, power was seized by election fraud cartel. The country is being turned into a vassal state of China, edging toward communism. If Korea falls to China, the sacrifice of those who fought for freedom will have been in vain. The evidence of election fraud is extensive. The use of Chinese-rigged election networks such as Huawei, partial voting with foreign aid, large-scale voting by Chinese nationals, mass duplicated voting, ballots using barcode without serial numbers or with QR code, forgery of election commission seals and stamps, mass use of counterfeit ballots from China, hacking of vote counting system, invalid ballots counted as valid, discovery of numerous tempered ballot boxes, manipulation of polls and online comments, suppression of election invalidation lawsuits, obstruction of investigation into fraud, organized hiring corruption, and evidence destruction by the Election Commission. Even the National Intelligence Service compound during a security inspection of the Election Commission on October 10th, 2023, that ballots could be forged, systems could be hacked, passwords were trivially set to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Multiple and proxy voting were possible, and the voter registration system could be manipulated. President Yoon Suk-yeol also acknowledged the existence of election fraud in statement related to martial law and impeachment proceedings. During the June 3rd presidential election, numerous Chinese nationals arrived near early voting stations by tour buses. They openly posted videos on Chinese social media claiming to have voted in Korea. Remarkably, the Election Commission's main password 12345 matches China's Citizens Service hotline, the number connecting central and local Chinese authority. Despite this, the election fraud cartel impeached President Yoon, who had imposed the shortest and most peaceful martial law in world history to examine fraud. The mass election manipulation of June 3rd, they installed Lee Jae-myung as fake president, forming a fake executive branch following a fake National Assembly.
creating a counterfeit republic. Even the judiciary, including the Supreme Court, has been compromised. Through lobbying, coercion, and pressure from the pro-China factions and the fake government, the courts delayed election lawsuits, ignored critical efforts, and issued dismissal that empowered the fake National Assembly and fake president. Power without legitimation brutally suppressed opposition. President Yoon, who imposed martial law to correct evidence of fraud, was arrested and detained. Former Prime Minister Hwang Kyo-ahn, who exposed the truth, has been harassed with very serious charges. Election monitors face daily intimidation. Religious leaders from Pastor Sononyo to Unification Church President Han have been detained. Senior pastors, including Kim Jong-un, Korean Billy Graham, have been pressured with race and summoning. This situation is alarmingly similar to Venezuela's path of democratic collapse. After Chavez's election fraud cartels gradually seized legislative, executive, and judicial powers, under Maduro, Venezuela transformed into full dictatorship. As Maduro recently demonstrated with a Hawaii phone, China session, Venezuela developed close ties with China, election fraud error, and resources control, suppressing freedom, forcing citizens to flee, and severing ties with the United States. In South Korea, a similar pattern is emerging. Pro-China forces are infiltrating politics, the economy, and society. The core of this infiltration is Chinese directed election fraud. The Democratic Party, controlling the National Assembly and executive branch through fraud, is steering Korea down a Venezuelan express. Figures like Wang Kuning and Han Pang-min through the Char economy are converting politicians, academics, and legal professionals into pro-China operatives. Key figures openly chant China session. On August 15, 2025, meeting between democratic lawmakers Zhu Mian and Han Pang-min showed that under Chinese instruction, Li Jiamyang is suppression for freedom organization, including Free University, which was linked on the White House website during Chai Kok Memorial event. South Korea has effectively become a vassal state under Chinese direction. Chinese capitalists purchasing large-scale real estate in strategic areas. Seoul, Yongsan, Junggu, Sejong, Gangnam, Jeju, undermining the lives and economic sovereignty of Koreans. Companies like Tencent, designated as a limited company by the U.S. Department of Defense, control Korean gaming, ID, entertainment, broadcasting, and the media companies either as major shareholder or through indirect investment. They are aggressively acquiring strategic industries, including semiconductor batteries and shipbuilding, stealing core technologies and trade secrets. The Lee Jae-myung administration has allowed visa-free entry for Chinese nationals, turning Korea into vassal state. Next year's local elections are being targeted for manipulation using this individual. The Chinese Communist Party is consolidating controls through unified strategies and super limited warfare tactics. Even U.S. recognition of Lee Jae-myung, for example, during trade negotiation expecting $350 billion investment, does not change the fact that he is Chinese public. The investment is practically impossible given Korea's foreign reserves and non-reserve currency status. It appears that designed to temporarily create the illusion of establishing in Washington, shift blame to the US, promote anti-American sentiment, and turn Korea into pro-China state. Assuming Lee Jae-myung can be controlled is grave misjudgment. Lee Jae-myung has lost all legitimacy due to North Korean remittance violation, Supreme Court convictions for election law violation, and confirmed election fraud. President Trump and the US Congress only need to state the truth. Korea has a fake president restored through Chinese election interference. US sanctions to actions against the Venezuelan judge and election commission staff would further strengthen accountability in Korea. More than 80% or 90% of Korean who dislike China consider the US a friend. They will rise, they will fight for Korea and for America. Through a fraudulent election systems, electronic vote counters have even been exported to Pacific nations like Papua New Guinea and Samoa. The goal is establishing pro-China regime, potentially threatening U.S. naval operations. Korea is not only a key ally, but the front line of U.S. security. If Korea is lost, China could dominate East Asia. Korea stands at the forefront of the global fight against communism. The struggle for Korea is also a spiritual battle between light and darkness. We will never give up. We will continue to fight. Charlie Kirk last visit was to South Korea. His sacrifice is awakening the Korean people. Let us protect the freedom of Korea, the country he cherished, together. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Park, for your wonderful substance and important information that you shared. Our last panelist is known by Ground C in Korea. What is Ground C? It is the ground, the foundation of conservatism in Korea. And so he is. His much watched YouTube channel, there are those who listen to his every word that he puts out. And let me tell you, this is a courageous, intelligent, well-informed voice that is helping to wake up the country of South Korea. And he is under increasing pressure right now from the current regime. He just put out a book, Democracy in Peril, exposing the Chinese Communist Party's threat and global election fraud. So please welcome Paul Kim, known as Ground C.
Right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Paul Kim. I run my YouTube channel with 900,000 subscribers. I really said I can't say I have 1 million subscribers, but I'm trying. The reason why I am here is because, like President Trump stated in his Truth Social, we are faced now purging and revolution situation in Korea. So before we get started, I want to send my deepest sympathies to Charlie Kirk's family. And I want to say that rest in peace, Charlie. He was my hero, And I started my conservative works in Korea and movement in Korea. And the reason why I started my YouTube channel in Korea was because of Charlie Kirk. He inspired me a lot. So, like Charlie Kirk has awakened American young adults, he has awakened a lot of Korean youth in Korea. So he is not only a hero to the US, he is also big hero to Korea. So I put more details about religious persecution in my paperwork I brought here. So for those who are interested in my paperwork, just let me know. I will hand out after this conversation. So I'm gonna go really quick for the religious persecution. Recently, the investigation of religious community in Korea, of course, especially Christianity, including civilians, have gone too far. So this persecution and purging crazily has been driven by Lee's administration. So fortunately, concerns over this issue have already spread out to political circles in Washington. So prominent American figures like including President Trump and a former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and a former Speaker of House Newt Gingrich and Ambassador Carl Sands, of course, Ambassador Northstan, they all have spoken out regarding religious persecution in Korea. So I put more details in my paperwork. Just let me know what I hand out. So I'm going to move to the Lee government threat to ordinary citizens. The suppression of ordinary citizens has also gone too far. Recently, an individual faced a police investigation for posting a sarcastic image criticizing Lee Jae-myung's economic policies. Additionally, a journalist who raised questions about Lee Jae-myung's father is also under police investigation. So earlier this year, the Democratic Party announced that it would report individuals who allegedly spread pro-insurrection propaganda.
그리고 그들은
Shortly thereafter, the party
윤석열
threatened to
정부가
censor
내란을
Kakao
했다고 지금 프레임을 씌우고 있고, 그리고 카카오톡을 통해 국민들의 언론까지도 장악하고 그리고 센서하려는 것을 보입니다. 그들은 발언의 자유까지 제한하며 그 전에 없었었던 독재주의 정권으로 향하려고 하는 것을 보이고 있습니다.
In fact, a political organization called Democratic Police Station even created a
민주적
website impersonating a police
경찰
station to intimidate
스테이션이라는 이름으로 일반 시민들을 센서하고 컨트롤하려고 하는 그 유튜버들까지 통제하려고 하는 그런 조짐을 보고 있습니다.
So he has led like a Korean version of the Cultural Revolution.
그래서 현재 그는 중국과 같은 문화 대혁명을 현재 대한민국에서 진행하고 있는 것입니다.
And the police station and prosecution office under Lee's government.
그래서 모든 검찰청까지 그리고 그러한 새로운 경찰 스테이션까지 만들면서 이재명 정부의 친화적인 그런 행동들을 보이고 있고,
So there are also cases in which YouTubers have been reported by South Korean left-leaning parties for allegedly spreading false information
그리고
and damaging
대한민국의 보수 유튜버들은 그들이 제대로 정확하지 않은 정보를 제공한다는 그러한 기소들까지 받은 상황입니다. 그리고 이재명을 전부터 매우 지지하려고 옆에서 도왔던 유동규 씨도 탄압을 받고 있는 것입니다. 유동규 씨는 이재명이 성남시장부터 그리고 경기도지사 그리고 이재명의 모든 산업과 관련된 모든 것을 할 때 옆에 있어 왔던 분이십니다. 그리고 유동규 씨처럼
joining insurrection incited by President Yoon. So that is why I call this Persian Revolution Korean version of Cultural Revolution.
그분들을 탄압하고 있기 때문에 저는 이재명 정권을 지금 중국 대혁명을 일으키는 사람이라고 지금 부르고 있습니다.
Yeah, Lee Jae-myung is taking steps to silence all critics directed at him. That is, journalists and YouTubers who allegedly spread false information face fines so severe that they can be financially crippled.
그리고 그 거짓 정보를 퍼뜨린다라고 그들은 좌파 정권 얘기를 하고 있고 그러한 정보들을 나르는 보수 유튜버들에게 너무나도 심한 벌금을 내림으로써 그들이 경제적으로 매우 힘들어하는 지경까지 그들은 탄압을 하고 있습니다. 그리고 우리 같은 보수 유튜버들과 코멘터들을 극우라고 프레임을 씌우며 그리고 찰리 커크까지도 극우라고 부르는 그러한 상황입니다. 그리고 대한민국의 좌파는 트럼프 정권의 모욕적으로 그리고 비판하며
South Korea already has laws explicitly prohibiting defamation.
그리고 이재명 정부에 반하는 내용들을 하는 사람들을 입막음을 시키고 그리고 모든 내용들을 거짓 정보라고 다 프레임을 씌우고 있습니다. 그리고 방통위까지 제안하며 그리고 언론의 모든 방송인들까지 그들이 진실을 말하는 것을 제안하고 있습니다. 그렇기 때문에 우리는 지금 발언의 자유까지도 없어지는 거고 종교의 자유 또한 없어지며 결사의 자유가 한국에서 없어지는 그리고 위험에 처한 상황입니다. 그리고 우리는 절대 싸움에서 지지 않을 것이며 항복하지 않을 것이며 그리고 대한민국 국민들은 미국 시민들이 더욱더 이것에 집중해 주시면 매우 감사할 것입니다. 감사드립니다.
One congressional hearing, one congressional resolution, more official statements from the White House, things from the State Department, this would all help. That would all help. In the remaining time that we have, we want to welcome questions from you, the audience. And so we have until 1:10. So if you could please give your question, state your name and your affiliation, and we will try to address the questions in the remaining time. So please, your questions.
Give priority to staffers first.
Congressional staffers, if you want to ask any questions, or anyone else.
Great.
So much for this wonderful panel, especially to Prime Minister. What can the United States do? You guys mentioned congressional
미국은 현재 어떠한 행동을 할 수 있을까요? 그리고 미국이 어떠한 행동들을 더 구체적으로 취하면 좋겠습니까?
Is that directed specifically to Prime Minister Level? Anyone? Okay. Maybe I'll kick that off then. There are all sorts of sanctions that the U.S. can lay on key figures in South Korea who deserve the sanctions. Whether it's economic sanctions, whether it's visa sanctions, not only on those people but their families. Think of the implications of those who have children who are studying in the U.S. and a visa sanction among them. There can be economic sanctions related to the coup d'etat that has happened.
를 일으킨 사람들에 대한 그러한 제재도 있을 수 있고요.
There could be a pushing of military
그리고 군사적인
that I think would be worth pushing. For example, a joint naval and air force base on Jeju Island.
그리고 한미 같이 합동하는 그러한 군사적인
There could be sanctions related to
합동 훈련 또한 있을 수 있습니다.
Such as the 8 million that was given by Lee Jae-myung
그리고
to
800만의 그 대북 송금 달러 이 등 모든 그 경제적인 제재를 가할 수 있습니다. 그리고 제가 전에 미국 정부에서 일한 것처럼 미국은 훨씬 더 생각보다 많은 옵션과 힘과 수많은 방안들이 있습니다. 이런 상황에 대해 대응할 수 있는 그런 방안들이요. 그 어떠한 나라보다도 막강한 대응과 방안들이 있습니다. 그래서 실제적인 이 현재 상황에 대응할 수 있는 방안들이 필요할 것입니다. 그리고 다른 분들의 답변도 들어보겠습니다. 더 코멘트를 붙이겠습니다. 그리고 미국의 인텔리전스 서비스를 위해 수많은 돈을 보낸 것을 들었습니다. 부정선거에 대해 한국에 일어나는 부정선거에 대해 더더 깊이 파헤쳐야 되며 숫자적인 통계적인 자료 그리고 이것들을 우리는 공론화해야 할 것이며
U.S. Embassy in Seoul, I recall in 2020, just said, no, nothing happened.
미국 대사관은 2020년에 아무 일도 일어나지 않았습니다 라고 말했었습니다.
Shortcomings, to put it mildly, in our approach. So really examining
그래서 우리는 어려운 질문들에 답을 해야 할 것이며 중국 공산당의 한국에 대해 그런 정치적으로 침투하는 것을 우리는 더더욱 조사해야 할 것입니다.
And for some reason we have a myopia towards it. That would be a very useful thing. The hearings which Ambassador Tan mentioned would be good as well. But really publicity of this, and this does make a difference.
그리고 우리가 조사하는 것은 우리 변화를 일으킬 수 있습니다. 미국 정부가 대한민국에 대해 관심을 보일 때, 언론이 관심을 보일 때, 전에 넬슨 만델라가 말씀하신 것처럼 나는 그때 감옥에 갇혔었을 때도 나를 위해 생각해주는 사람이 있다는 것을 믿었었다. 그래서 선한 사람들은 당연히 있고 당연히 나쁜 사람들은 뒤에 있지만 우리는 선한 사람들과 같이 싸울 수 있습니다.
제가 긴 시간 동안 많은 말씀을 해주시고 경청해 주셔서 대단히 고맙게 생각을 합니다. 모스탄 대사께서 답을 말씀 다 드린 것 같아요. 제가 안부터 붙이지 않아도 될 정도로 충분한 말씀을 하셨습니다. 말씀이 안 되신 것들만 간단하게 좀 말씀을 드리면 대한민국의 부정선거는 수사만 하면 끝납니다. 뭐 다른 거 할 것 없어요. 수사만 하면 또 저 같은 사람이 소위 공안 사건에 대해서 조사를 했던 경험이 있는 저 같은 사람 그리고 의지만 있는 사람이 나서서 수사만 하면 제가 볼 때는 6개월 이내에 모든 팩트가 다 드러납니다. 구속될 놈들 다 구속되고 제도 개선까지 다 만들 수 있는 이런 것이 바로 수사입니다. 그런데 어떻게 하든 이 문재인 정부 또 이재명 정부는 수사를 안 하려고 이리 빼고 저리 빼고 있습니다. 여러 가지 선거법 제도도 악용해 가면서 그렇게 하고 있습니다. 그래서 우리 국제사회에서 아니 그렇게 부정선거가 많다고 하니 수사부터 해봐라. 없으면 그만 아니냐. 뭐 이렇게 하면 될 거 아니에요. 저는 자신 있습니다. 이거 하면 6개월이면 다 끝나요. 이 간단한 걸 안 하고 있는 것이 의도가 있다고 보이지 않습니까? 그리고 또 한 가지는 저희는 이 거짓 고소고발, 거짓 또는 경고 이런 것에 대해서 그때그때 싸우고 있습니다. 그냥 넘어가는 게 아니라 고소하면 맞고소, 경고하면 우리가 먼저 팩트 확인을 합니다. 이 일은 어떻게 된 것이냐 물어서 답이 나오는 것에 대해서 만약에 수사할 건 수사를 촉구하고 국민에게 알릴 건 알리고 이렇게 저희는 지금까지 5년 가까이 싸워오면서 부정선거와 싸워오면서 불법에 해당하는 일들을 뭐 거의 하지 않았어요. 간혹은 저항권의 행사를 하기도 했지만은 불법한 거 없습니다. 그래서 저희를 공격할 때마다 저희가 강력하게 대처를 하면서 싸워가고 있습니다. 그런데 여기서 중요한 것은 우리 대한민국과 국제사회에서 이 부정선거의 실태들을 아는 것이 굉장히 중요할 것 같아요. 대한민국도 맨 처음에는 저에 대해서 음모론자라고 했습니다. 저는 평생 대한민국의 자유민주주의를 위해서 싸운 사람인데 절대로 음모론자라고 하고 있어요. 나쁘게 말하면 간첩이라는 말이에요. 절대로 말도 안 되는 소리들이 저질러지고 있는데 한 4년 5년 지나면서 이제 음모론이라는 말 자체가 거의 없어진 것 같습니다. 이제 그 말하는 사람은 정말 멍청한 바보거나 나쁜 의도를 가지고 있는 자 아니고는 그런 말 자체를 하지 않습니다. 왜 그렇게 얘기할 수 있는가? 대한민국의 정말 유력한 국가기관이라고 말할 수 있는 것이 국가정보원입니다. 국정원에서 이런 부정선거의 실태에 대해서 보안감사를 통해서 보안점검을 통해서 확인했고 발표까지 했습니다. 그런데도 선관위는 아무 반박을 하지 못하고 있어요. 둘째로는 대한민국의 대통령까지 알게 됐습니다. 윤석열 대통령이 부정선거로 싸우다가 구속까지 됐어요. 자기들이 제일 아픈 아킬레스건을 건드리려고 하니까 막 서둘러가지고 법에도 절차도 어겨가면서 이렇게 구속을 해버려서 입을 틀어 막은 겁니다. 대통령보다도 강력한 증인이 어디 있습니까? 또 저는 미국이 있다고 봅니다. 트럼프 대통령도 첫 번째 성공한 뒤에 두 번째 하려고 하다가 부정선거로 안 됐다, 실패했다, 당선되지 못했다고 하는 걸 알고 계속 얘기를 하고 있지 않습니까? 저희가 지금 온 것도 이런 부분들에 관해서 또 그러나 트럼프 대통령이 이제 2기 대통령으로 살 수 있는 일, 하기 어려운 일들이 있을 수 있습니다. 그러나 팩트를 숨기는 분은 절대 아니죠. 그래서 그 내용을 알고 확인하고 그리고 우리도 힘을 얻고 대한민국에도 지금 국제사회와 미국의 부정선거에 대한 증언들을 모아서 갖다 전하려고 합니다. 지금 여기만 앉아 계신 분들만 해도 부정선거를 확신하고 있고 거짓이 아니라 팩트로 입증하고 있는 이런 분들입니다. 이런 귀한 이야기들을 여러분들이 오늘 말씀하시는 것 같이 포함해서 대한민국에 전하고 반드시 부정선거를 막아내는, 부정선거를 막는다는 것은 즉 뭐냐면 자유민주주의를 지킨다는 말입니다. 선거 하나를 지킨다는 것이 아니라 자유민주주의를 지킨다고 하는 거예요. 부정선거로 정권을 탈취해가지 않았습니까? 앞으로도 계속 그렇게 해갈 것이 너무 뻔하게 보이기 때문에 저희는 이제 부정선거를 가지고 저는 사실 하는 게 많습니다. 부정선거만 하는 게 아니고 오랫동안 이제 정부에 있었고 또 입법 사법 행정을 다 경험을 했던 그런 사람이기 때문에 다른 부분을 할 것도 많죠. 그러나 가장 중요한 것은 부정선거로 정권을 탈취해가면 아무 소용이 없는 거예요. 아무리 좋은 인재가 후보로 나와도 그 사람 되지 않습니다. 그냥 조작된 사람들이 나라를 만들어가게 되면 그게 어떻게 나라라고 말할 수가 있겠습니까? 그 제일 좋은 방법이 결국은 부정선거로 사회주의 공산국가로 만들어가려고 하는데 가만히 있을 수가 없어서 제가 말씀을 드렸습니다. 경청해 주셔서 감사합니다.
I'll try to do a quick recap. Thank you, Ambassador Morstan. Can you hear me?
Okay.
I think Morstan actually provided all the solutions. Was almost complete, but I would just like to add a few more points. Right now, Republic of Korea OPP's election fraud investigation. So the simple solution is to have election fraud that went on investigated. As Republic Security Prosecutor, as I have served as a public security prosecutor, I believe there are more prosecutors like me who are willing and capable in investigating the election fraud. However, right now, the Moon Jae-in administration, and after that, the subsequent administration, Lee Jae-myung, is trying to engage in all means possible to evade investigating election fraud. Because with just a simple investigation within 6 months, all the frauds could be exposed. Right now, the international society could provide a voice and demand Korea to investigate election fraud. That will also be a great help. Another factor is that I am being oppressed and accused, and they have issued all kinds of warnings against me. For every accusation, I never let it go without a fight. For every summonings, every indictment, we give a fight because we have the evidence, we have the facts and substantial evidences to back us up. So through these efforts, we're trying to raise awareness, and I have been doing that for the past 5 years. I haven't done anything illegal. I have tried my best to carry out resistance. But we're going to continue this fight, the fight against Chinese assistance and the fight for protecting free democracy in Korea. I would like the international society to understand the situation and look into election fraud. I have been accused of being a conspiracy theorist, but thankfully after my efforts, people who believe still in conspiracy are either too big-headed, they're foolish, or they're doing that because they have a wrong objective in mind. Because even the Korean intelligence organization, the National Intelligence System, had implemented investigation and found that the NSC has many points that they are vulnerable to hacking and to manipulation in terms of the electoral results. President Yoon, upon realizing it, fought against election fraud, but got arrested because of it, because they thought that President Yoon will expose the whole election fraud that has been underway. I do know that President Trump also fought this war against election fraud, especially with the elections in 2020. I believe that President Trump is wise and knows what's going on regarding election fraud, not only in the United States, but also in Korea. We have collected countless evidences on election fraud that has been underway in Korea, and we are willing to convey them to you. And we will continue this fight against election fraud because this fight is actually a fight to protect free democracy. So if there's a government that has been installed through election fraud, it's a fraudulent government, and the government that controls, the fraudulent government that controls the judicial system, executive system, all kinds of system in Korea is a government that is not legal. So we need to fight election fraud, which is the basis of all the problem in Korea. Of course, as I have worked in the government, there are many other activities that I could engage in, but I think that there is none most important or urgent than this fight against election fraud.
And towards that end, as we wrap up here, there is a website that is trying to be a clearinghouse for that information. It's election-fraud.com. Election-fraud.com. And then I also want to point you to KCPAC resources, books and other things, I think a sampling of which are on the table over there. And let me just make one last point as President Trump got an agreement from President Lee Jae-myung to give $350 and then an additional $150 billion. And Lee Jae-myung is recently saying that he doesn't have that, the country doesn't have that money. Well, let me tell you some sources of where that money can come from in conclusion. One is they're looking to spend over $100 billion in buying offshore wind and also solar energy equipment from the Chinese Communist Party. In addition, around $100 billion that they give to leftist NGOs and other leftist organizations inside of South Korea. In addition to that, you have over $50 billion in cash reserves that the South Korean government has. Those three things alone adds up to $250 billion. Don't give me this, I don't have the money, garbage, and don't lie to President Trump. He should demand that Lee Jae-myung follow through on his promise and actually give that money. And I gave you nearly 3 sources that can provide $250 billion in accordance to what he promised to President Trump. With that said, thank you so much for your attention to the Korean crisis that is going on. And if you would you please thank our wonderful distinguished panelists who have shared with us today. Thank you very much. We are done now.
Thank you. We do have some other people across the back. Please take some of you locked in and yes.
네, 수고했습니다. 명사회다 수고하셨습니다. 아이고, 수고하셨습니다.
그렇게 오래 안 걸렸어요.
감사합니다. 우리 집 파이팅. 네. 공부의 여신이라고 착각하시는 분들이 계실 텐데 공부의 여신 채널 제 통역 실력이 나날이 늘고 있습니다. 여러분 파이팅. 부정선거 첫 개월